Morrison government had a huge win today, and so did taxpayers. The government's tax cuts will be passed by Parliament after 4 crossbench senators agreed to back them: Jackie Lambie, Cory Bernardi and the 2 senators from Centre Alliance. Round 1 of those cuts will be a tax rebate paid this month, I believe, of up to just over $1,000 for people on average wages or lower. Round 2 will be in 4 years' time, round 3 in 5. So by then, the vast majority of taxpayers, 94% of them, will pay no more than 30 cents in the dollar. That's incentive. That's obviously good for you, for taxpayers. It's also a huge win for the government. So who are the losers? Well, first there's Labor, which still hasn't got around to saying, really, yes to that full package of cuts. So it's looking irrelevant and divided and whatever. But also want to single out all the media left people who backed Malcolm Turnbull as Prime Minister and were filthy on Finance Minister Matthias Cormann for not saving Turnbull from being sacked last year. As recently as last Sunday, some of them, Nikki Savva especially, were claiming that Cormann's credibility was now shot because he deserted Turnbull. No one would trust him anymore.
Cormann is a vastly diminished figure. His credibility has been smashed.
He's lost so much credibility, not just within his own party, but across the parliament.
And it became Matthias Cormann's intervention ultimately that really was the death knell for the Prime Minister.
Well, how wrong they were. The crossbenchers who backed these tax cuts, they backed them because they trusted Cormann and the government's promise that if they backed these tax cuts now, the government would later back their own proposals. The Centre Alliance's plan to make gas cheaper and Jackie Lambie's demand for more money to Tasmania for social housing. Joining me now is the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. Thank you so much, Treasurer. When will people see that first cut in their pockets, the tax cut in their pockets, that one of up to $1,080?
Well, with the passage of legislation, the benefits will flow from next week. The ATO Commissioner has said that his staff will work through the weekend, and once people put in their tax return, Andrew, it won't be long after that that they get their refund. That's obviously good news for more than 10 million taxpayers who will benefit. This will put $8 billion into the economy each year. The idea of the tax cuts has been endorsed by the Reserve Bank Governor. It's good for the economy. It encourages aspiration, rewards effort, and obviously is consistent with the Liberal and National Party's values of enabling Australians to earn more and to keep more of what they earn.
Now, the second round isn't due for another 4 years, so you'll have this big stimulus now, but then 4 years to wait for the next round. The Reserve Bank Governor is pleading for you to do more to stimulate the economy. Why don't you bring the second cut forward to this year?
Well, we're being faithful with the Australian people. We took to the election this complete tax package, which is $158 billion, but shouldn't be seen in isolation because it backs on from the $144 billion of tax cuts that are already legislated from last year's budget. Together, that's more than $300 billion of taxpayers' money that will be returned to them where it rightly belongs. So we're being faithful with the Australian people, but we do agree with the Governor that it's not left to monetary policy to do all the heavy lifting. That's why these tax cuts will be beneficial. That's why our infrastructure spend, which is a $100 billion pipeline of projects, and that's why our deregulation and our work with 80,000 new apprentices and our trade agenda, as well as the backing of small business with the extension of the instant asset write-off, which has been already used by more than 300,000 small businesses. All of that is good for the economy, with both fiscal and monetary policy working to support growth and jobs.
I got that, but the Governor clearly thinks it's not enough. He's been making speech after speech, as you've no doubt heard, saying you've got to spend more on infrastructure or something because the economy is slowing, unemployment's rising, things are looking a bit shaky. So is it the fact that you're not bringing the second cut forward, as Labor is suggesting, because you finally promised to deliver this first budget surplus in 12 years, this financial year, you can't afford to do it?
Well, look, I think if you look at the Governor's statement closely, he does point out in his words that employment growth is strong, that investment is actually having an impact in offsetting some of the challenges we face with the drought and with the softening in the housing market. He's also pointed to the fact that the trade tensions between China and the US are a really significant factor weighing on the global economic outlook, but he's also applauded what the government has done on tax cuts. So we encourage states to spend more money. We would love in my state and your state of Victoria, Andrew, for the East-West Link to be built, and we've got $4 billion waiting to be spent there if Daniel Andrews reaches out and decides to build that important road. So there are a number of projects that are already shovel-ready or already underway, with more to come.
Oh, by the way, good news for you, Treasurer. The tax cut your tax cut has just passed through the House, so congratulations on that bit. Can you still guarantee, given all the troubles you're talking about, particularly overseas, China, etc., can you still guarantee that you're going to actually be able to deliver that surplus you promised for this year in your last budget?
Look, we're absolutely committed to the surplus. That was spelt out in the budget, and we will deliver that surplus and be the first surplus in more than 12 years.
Now, the Reserve Bank has slashed interest rates emergency lows, just 1%, less than inflation. As I said, there are all these signs of trouble that it mentioned, the Governor in his statement. Is he actually wrong when he says that we need governments, whether it's you or, as you say, it's the state, should spend more money? Is he wrong on that, or is he too gloomy?
No, I mean, the Governor of the Reserve Bank is a very respected figure, and certainly my working relationship with him has been very productive and constructive, and he's absolutely right that monetary policy shouldn't do all the heavy lifting. That's why we have an economic plan that was set out in the budget, and tonight's news about the tax cuts is very significant because, as you pointed out in your introduction, we have done it against the will of the Labor Party. They've ignored the will of the Australian people. The Australian people spoke very loudly in favour of tax cuts, but with Anthony Albanese and also his shadow treasurer Jim Chalmers supporting tax hikes instead of tax cuts, the Labor Party was never going to give us the support we needed. That's why we worked very constructively with the crossbench.
Now, part pensioners are losing 50 cents of their pension for every dollar they earn above that they're deemed to earn from their savings. Your government has set that deeming rate at 3.25%, but these interest rate cuts mean they're lucky to get 2.5 from they won't even get 2.5 from the bank. They're getting squeezed. Are you going to do anything to help them?
Well, this is a very important issue, and we understand the pressure that this puts on depositors and people who are on the pension, and that's why there is a submission coming before the Expenditure Review Committee, which is the budget process, very shortly. So we are focused on that. I do want to point out to your viewers that only 1 in 4 pensioners are affected by the deeming rates. There are different rates, there's a lower deeming rate and a higher deeming rate, and it applies not just to financial assets that are cash deposits, but also financial assets that may be managed funds or shareholdings and the like, where the return has been greater than what we've seen when people put money in the bank. But we are very seized of this issue and watch this space.
Good. Just quickly, Malcolm Turnbull's popped up again, dumped as Prime Minister last year, gives the government another spray in the Australian Jewish news. Attacks Peter Dutton, Matthias Cormann, what's new? Also attacks the decision of Malcolm Turnbull to move our embassy from Tel Aviv, in Israel, from Tel Aviv to the capital, Jerusalem. Says, whatever your views are of the merits of that, I thought the timing was just calculated to win support in the Wentworth by-election, he means. It showed a patronising insensitivity to the Jewish community. Patronising, insensitive, an insult to Jews? What do you think?
Well, look, I'm not going to criticise Malcolm's support for the Jewish community, Andrew. He has been very consistent in that over a long period of time, not just as a member for Wentworth, but before he went into politics. But as you know, our voting at the United Nations, whether it's been under Scott Morrison, Malcolm Turnbull or Tony Abbott, we have been consistent in supporting the state of Israel, their right to exist within secure borders, and to condemn the terrorist groups that we've seen like Hezbollah and Hamas and the actions that they have taken. So there's no moral equivalence on our side. We stand with the democracy in the Middle East, namely Israel, which deserves to live in peace and security, and sometimes its neighbours don't give it that right.
Really, Malcolm Turnbull's got to get over himself. Josh Frydenberg, thank you so much indeed for your time, and congratulations again.
Good to be with you, Andrew.